Here we are, episode number 9 of the 11Tenths podcast, and we are here to talk about something that will be relevant for the age of time until what?
Cars start hovering.
Yeah, okay. Wheels. I am here with Randy, owner-operator of 11Tenths Racecraft. I am David, Milk for Coffee. Let's dive into the world, because it's literally a million different options, and we're not even talking offsets and widths and stuff. Let's start with the major thing is
construction.
Weight, construction. They're the same thing.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start off on that? The importance of having a lightweight wheel. Why? Why would you want to have it?
Unsprung weight. So you want to try and keep the weight, anything that's hanging off the suspension, down. So you don't want to go too heavy with the brakes. You don't want to get a run flat tire because they actually weigh considerably more than the stock tire, the rubber tires.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's
how much I hate run flats. Oh my God.
Well, it's true. You know, it's not just that. People don't realize the quality of tire. Not just a run flat versus a regular tire, but a cheap tire versus an expensive tire versus a performance tire. Not only does it come down to the weight of the actual tire and the actual wheel or rim, it actually comes down to how well they balance in some cases too. A lot of people don't think about that, but a poor tire, a poor rim material can add up on one side of how the process is made. We'll get into that in a bit about casting and forging and stuff, but even that can make a difference. So if you're feeling something through the wheel, it might just be they couldn't balance your set. You know what I mean? So
the whole floor was shaking there.
Well, yeah, I've been there.
That's a good analogy.
Is that a warped disc or is that a tire? But I mean, you don't think about that, but those are factors, and that is literally, we've said it before, it's where the rubber meets the road. There's no more important part of your car really than that palm-sized patch that meets the road.
Times 4. That's it. That's all you have. You can have all the horsepower and best brakes in the world, but if you can't put that down with a good compound tire, you know. Well,
and unsprung weight. So what we mean by that is it's weight that is not actually damped. So the car's not riding on it. It is basically weight that is not accounted for in the suspension and mechanical setup of the car and how it rides. So let's say that the simplest way I can think to summarize it, if you hit a pothole and your wheel goes into the pothole, that's not sprung, versus all of the vibrations and everything else, the sidewall of the tire and then the suspension system and all the rest of the car are taking that and it is a sprung weight. So that's a very simplistic and maybe not a great analogy, but then take that into road undulations or turns or leading the weight or whatnot. It can make a significant difference on how it feels and the performance of the car.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of communications broadcast through the steering wheel, and you feel a lot, and I know I can notice a big difference when I go from one set of wheels right to another. It's like night and day.
Yeah.
Right. So
it's a very anyone who's changed from winter to just their normal wheels, like a steel set, to maybe an aluminum or a wider set, there is a big difference. A wider set of wheels, you'll start feeling like you're a streetcar going down the road. So there's a lot of factors there. So in terms of weight, the best way to summarize that is not down to just the construction. You can have a wheel that's a dinner plate, but it comes down to material.
Yeah, I mean, just because it's a lightweight wheel doesn't mean it's a strong wheel.
Yeah.
So there are different processes of how they make wheels, and some are much stronger than others.
Yeah.
And the stronger wheels generally do cost more because there's more involved in the manufacturing process. So, you know, it's hard to find a good yet inexpensive wheel, right? A lot of times you can get a really expensive wheel that's good, but you're also, you know, you're also paying on the tail end of the marketing and all the other stuff going on with that said companies. And of course, you know, depends on where they're made too. Some of the processes here in North America tend to cost a bit more in production than somewhere else in the world.
Well, and there's different standards. If you're not an engineer or a machinist or whatnot or whatever, there are lots of different standards. You've got a German standard, so you got the TUV. I'm not sure what we'd have JLW here for wheels, but the JLW and like Japanese market, and then other markets that support it. And in some cases, there are certain manufacturers all over the world that just replicate those wheels. So the first thing to be aware of is cast wheels, because it's the most common and cheapest set, easiest to get into.
That's generally what the cars come with. When you go to the showroom and you buy a car, you know, like I'm going to say 99% of them come with cast wheels.
The one thing to remember about a stock wheel, though, is that is engineered by the company that manufactured the car, or they're working closely with the manufacturer of the cast wheel. So even though it's cast, they're generally modeling what the weight.
That's true. And they're also taking into consideration the tire that's actually designed to be sold with that car.
Right.
So if you go ahead and change the tire, that can drastically also impact, you know, the impact resistance going into the forces of the wheel if you hit a pothole.
For sure.
Right. So
casting is very simple because it's a very quick and easy process. It is literally a mold. That they're pouring molten steel or aluminum now into.
Yeah, so they'll pour molten aluminum into it. There's a bit of pressure, and but you know there is always a chance, and there typically is porosity. So there's bubbles within.
Air bubbles within.
As the mold cools down, it takes a couple of seconds, and then the mold splits open, and this hunk of aluminum that looks like a wheel just pops out. And generally it'll go on a conveyor belt or through a robot, and it'll go to a next process which kind of machines the face to make it all look a little bit more aesthetic, because a lot of times it doesn't look very pretty when it comes out of the mold. So.
I've got a mini tip for you. So the next thing is they machine it, so the face is where your bolts or nuts go, and then what basically goes onto the brake.
And the bead too.
And the bead as well.
Yeah, that's an important part.
The thing is, a lot of people out there are refinishing their wheels, and you want to be aware that the section where your nuts or your bolts meet the surface and the back plate should not be powder coated. That should be taped off or blocked off or machined. So just be aware of that. I've seen that on occasion. That's a safety concern, because the paint thickness and that it's a safety concern that will break down. It'll also change offsets and stuff like that. Just a quick tip. So the next thing, so cast wheels are very straightforward. We see them all the time. After that, they've started to get into...
Well, I would say let's look at the opposite end of the spectrum, which is a forged wheel.
Yeah, okay.
And then we can revisit the...
Because there's now something more common in the middle. That's been really kind of come up.
So we want to touch on the cast wheels, which are the most inexpensive and the most popular wheel out there. And then we're talking about the forged wheel. Now, a forging is generally a large chunk of solid aluminum that under manufacturing process, the aluminum is molten red hot, and it goes under presses, and it goes back and forth when it's like red hot, and it gets compacted and it becomes very, very dense. So it's like basically a massive block of aluminum that has been steamrolled many times while it's glowing red hot to become very dense. And then they basically take a big chunk of this block and they put it onto a CNC machine, and the CNC will cut out the shape of a wheel. And, you know, there's probably 6 to 8 hours of machine time, a lot of wasted material, because a lot of the stuff obviously gets recycled.
Wasted but recycled.
It gets recycled. But, you know, between the design process, the time it takes to manufacture each one of them, the time it takes to even manufacture a blank, they call it a blank, these billet blocks. And all these things take time now, but you also left with a wheel that has a very dense metallurgical traits, like a characteristic, right?
Now, Randy, that sounds expensive.
Yeah, usually, like these wheels are, you know, upwards of $1,000 each, right? Like, you know, even if it's a small 16-inch wheel, I don't think I've seen a forged monoblock for less than $800.
I want to reiterate and just repeat what you said. There is a lot of engineering that goes into it. They generally keep an eye on the stresses, the design, because obviously you want to make something either popular to sell in mass, or they may be custom designing something for you. Then programming the machine, which takes time, and the machine time and tooling and all the rest of it. And it generally will be a very small production run, if not a one-off set of wheels. So it is the best. And speaking to the forging, the idea is that porous, when we talked about casts and there's air pockets and stuff like that, there's the ability for cracks to form in between the air bubbles. Okay, so if you have a denser form of material where the grains, if you're talking microscopic, can't see it with the bare eye, grains of material that literally get pressed and are so dense that there's less likely or less likelihood that those cracks will form, and that's why they're so strong.
Right.
And obviously, if you're going to have a more dense material, it will generally be lighter because you don't need to have a giant piece of it to make up for it.
Yeah, you don't have to have a really big spoke. You can actually have a much smaller spoke because the material itself is denser and stronger.
Yeah, and you've seen that where, you know, you might even get in some cases hollow spokes and stuff like that. And you know, I'm sure we talked about hover cars and stuff out there, but there's one company that's already put out a 3D printed wheel. Now the 3D printer couldn't put it out in I'll plug them because they're a great manufacturer, HRE. But they couldn't 3D print a whole wheel because of time, speed, cost, and the size of the machine. They had to print it out in sections. So there's some room there for what will be the best in terms of where we can go with material.
And we are generally speaking about aluminum. There's a way you can actually have magnesium wheels, which are even lighter than aluminum.
Well, those started on race cars in the 70s.
Back in the day, they had the magnesium wheels, and they do have a shelf life just because magnesium tends to fail over a certain amount of a certain time. But I believe they re-engineered the magnesium, and they actually introduced other alloys within the magnesium itself to make it last longer. And also, really, you know, it's an expensive wheel as well. But, you know, truly, it's, you know, you can get them down to like 12 pounds for like a 17-inch wheel. I mean, that's phenomenal. Right?
If we're going to talk about weight too, that's the thing. On the other end, where you're willing to spend a ton of money, there is no shortage of exotic materials it's all come down from racing in one point or another, be it rallying or Formula One, whatever. Because now it's not uncommon to see a carbon fiber wheel.
On OE cars like
Ford.
The Mustang.
The Mustang.
The Ford GT.
The Ford GT.
What else?
Your Koenigseggs, right? Like some of your supercars and hypercars. We'll get there. Not to be confused with a carbon fiber wrapped wheel or wheel barrel. That's different.
They basically take a forged wheel and then they put one layer of carbon around it.
It's a skin. So that is literally for aesthetics. Was it Porsche that was doing the giant loom wheel? Yeah, they had basically like a giant loom, like if you're thinking like a big old sewing machine this bigger than the room we're in, and they basically weave the carbon into spokes and into, like, there's all sorts of different ways of doing it.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it's cool. We're giving you Google things. Make sure you come back, subscribe, like, ring the bell. You know the drill. Please, it helps, and we want to make sure that you come back. But there's no shortage on the other end of things, and we're literally just talking about the exotic materials. Then you can get into...
Well, we were talking about forge wheels, right? Now, there are different types of forge wheels. Like the most expensive one would be a monoblock. So monoblock means, like, let's say the wheel is 19-inch by 10. So we're talking about a block 10 inches thick. It has to be machined down. So that's a monoblock wheel. And then we're talking about a multi-piece wheel. So you can get a 2 or 3-piece wheel, whereas the forging block, the billet block, only needs to be as thick as the center section of where the spokes are.
The face.
Yeah, the face. And then you bolt that up to a spun barrel or hoop. And that's generally purchased, you know, from a different manufacturer. And these guys make, you know, thousands of these hoops and barrels and kind of mishmash, put it all together. But then you have the added weight of the hardware. So we're talking about all 42 or 44 bolts and nuts, unless the wheel itself has threaded, and then you can just do the bolts themselves.
Again, a couple options there. Those aren't really, that's more of an aesthetic thing. There's no particular advantage. You can choose different materials.
I would say the biggest advantage is thickness, because really when it comes to a monoblock, I think you're pretty much limited to like 10 and a half inch. So if you truly want like a massive footprint, like a good 13-inch wide wheel, you have to go with a multi-piece.
Or spend a stupid amount of money. Get a custom, forging. The thing is, what's funny is you're finding a compromise there already. If you're not going with the monoblock, a little known fact is that the way that they make barrels and lips and hoops is the same way that they make bowls and plates.
Yeah.
They literally spin it and they stretch the material over a form.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of like when you watch that little clay thing.
Yeah.
With the movie Ghost.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. Patrick Swayze comes along and he massages the metal. But it is similar to that. Basically, if you'd almost look like a metal roller skate wheel or coming along, and it stretches the barrel out to a shape that matches what you need for width and diameter and stuff like that. And it's another world of, it's not forging per se, but the same idea where you're stretching along and making the material not porous, but it's modifying the molecular structure in a way, and it's still strong, but it's not as strong.
Exactly. It's a true hybrid, right? And that's what it is. So this is basically a wheel that's not quite as strong as a true forged wheel, but it's quite a bit stronger than a cast wheel. And generally those wheels start as a cast center, and then they take the added lump of material around the outside, put it on a special machine, and with this mandrel, they'll actually push out the shape of the barrel, right, where the width of the wheel.
So that's
called a flow forged or roll, or
everyone's got a different name for it, but flow forged I think is the more common one. But the idea is that you're forging the face and then, like you said, rolling out the rest.
Flow form, I guess I'd say.
Which it's common. It works. They're that kind of the happy little middle ground, because you're able to get some pretty neat designs and a strong face, a light wheel, but it's one piece of material, which minimizes the process. You're down to just the machining, and then you're rolling out the wheel.
And that's just because generally the impact from hitting a pothole or a turtle on a racetrack or whatever travels through with the bead and goes on to the mating surface. It's not so much in the spokes or the center of the wheel, although I have seen some of these wheels crack right around the hub, because again, it is porous there and it's still a cast wheel on the inside. There are some manufacturers like Titan that I believe they do use some sort of a hybrid forged center, and then they roll form a forged center as opposed to a cast center.
Oh, okay.
So it's pretty cool. And they're priced really well too, the Titan 7 wheels.
Well, and that's the thing too, like a common brand out there that is very relevant recently is Rotiform. So they'll offer a cast, then they'll offer a cast like a machined wheel or a forged wheel, then they'll offer the multi-piece. So you might find different options from different manufacturers. So dig in a little bit and see what's out there.
I think Apex is doing the same thing.
Is doing the same thing.
They started with flow forged wheels, and now they have a forged wheel spin-off, so the same design.
Now, one thing going back to barrels, you can find a very strong barrel depending on lip design, because you can have, obviously, so there's step lipped, there's reverse lip and all that, but I believe step lip is known to be one of the stronger ones, just on the way that it's made.
I think so.
Like I think wheels, Schmidt wheels, like that, they're German, right? Those are known to just have like the strongest barrels and strongest faces. They're heavy. But so you want to be aware of that too. The more delicate a wheel looks, most likely the more delicate it will be.
And the other thing too is a lot. So what they're doing now to try and they can't project, how many people with a Mazda 3 or a Honda Civic are going to purchase wheels. So what they do is they have the centers. They actually come without any holes. So when you order these wheels from a distributor, they actually put it on a machine local to where you live, not overseas, and they actually drill out the whole center, the PCD, or basically the whole center. So it's either 5114 or 5120.
The bolt circle, what it fits to your car.
So they'll do that before they ship them out, to the end user. Sometimes they'll even have like a 10-hole pattern. So they'll have a 5-hole at 5114, and then the other 5112. Or something like that. So, and that they don't have to drill it then. They just basically, you choose which pattern you want.
So speaking of drilling and stuff like that, it is becoming more and more common to see guys re-drill. Now let's specify. 11Tenths is a race shop. Like we help you with looks, but the goal here is track oriented.
And
you'll never re-drill.
I don't recommend.
It's like. I'm not recommending it either. I know Randy doesn't. If you're going to a show, your car's coming off a trailer, okay. Okay. If it's literally rolling into the show, fine. but daily driven or anywhere near a track, just driven, period, it's a very big risk because
it's part of the engineering, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the wheel is engineered to have a hole in a specific location, and all the stresses stem from that location.
Yeah.
When you start slotting that hole,
oh yeah,
because you're re-drilling it, it essentially becomes a slot instead of a hole. You know, now you've weakened some of the surface around where it goes closer to the face of, you know, the hub.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't recommend it. Don't.
People, the best way of summarizing is metal is just like any other material, different properties, but it can also be brittle.
Yeah,
you know, like a hard piece of plastic after a couple of, it can get brittle. Even though it's hard, it'll get brittle. Steel or aluminum are the same way. There's only so many times you can work it before it becomes brittle as well. So you've got, heat. If someone's going to weld it, that's going to affect the structure.
Absolutely.
If someone's going to drill it and then put an insert in it, that's going to affect the structure. So be aware that also, someone can do it, but
also some of the processes, like powder coating doesn't get quite hot enough, but I believe that anodizing does get very hot, where it can actually alter the actual strength and the hardness of the material that's designed, right? So just take that in mind.
So to fill you in, if you haven't watched the episode on Mr. Randy Spar, go ahead and do that. But let's give you a bit of a snippet. Randy's got a machining engineering background, and that's kind of what I do on the regular. So what you see is calling out material in an annealed state or a hardened state, and there's different ways of adding hardness or taking away hardness to different grades of steel and aluminum. So you just want to be aware. It's manufactured in a certain way. Yes, you can rework certain things, but baking at high temperature can change the process and hardness. It can soften your wheel or make it more brittle. So anyway, that's something we should touch on for safety's sake.
And also when you repair a wheel. So let's just say you bend that wheel. You take it to your favorite wheel repair place. They're going to heat that up. And they're going to either weld a chunk if it's missing, or they're going to try and press it back, and they use a lot of heat. And they're going to get it looking great, and they're going to spray it back to silver or
look great.
Make it look awesome, and they're going to put it on a machine. They're going to machine the bead so your tire doesn't leak. But a good chunk of that wheel, I'm going to say 30% of that wheel is a lot softer now. So there's a really good chance that you're going to bend that wheel again or crack it, even easier than initially. So keep that in mind. Also, when you're buying used wheels, look for signs to see if they've been refinished. Sometimes you don't want the perfect looking wheel because it looks like it's just been covered up. It's kind of like buying a car full of Bondo. Right?
Yeah, at least you can see where the Bondo is instead of later, right? It's you don't want any surprises. So we should touch on that for safety. Something that I learned recently too, not directly related to the wheels, but makes contact with the wheels, is if you're changing offsets with spacers, which is not necessarily legal where we are, just a heads up. But your studs and stuff like that, everything has a shelf life. There's a reason why if you're in NASCAR, they actually change, they rebuild motors every race, but they also change the wheel studs every race, not a little known fact. So little things like that, just be aware you're working with a material that has a shelf life. It's strong, it's meant to be strong, but it's also the most abused part of the car.
It's also meant to be, at least inspected or touched several times. It's not like just, install and forget. Really, wheel studs, you should always check to make sure. Use a bit of Loctite. Make sure that they haven't backed out if you use an impact gun when you're loosening the nuts. Yeah,
you can't just ugh everything. That's I know it's funny to say, but you really just should be careful with that. And the thing is again, materials. So, there's a difference. You can get titanium lugs and studs, and you can get aluminum and steel, but everyone comes with a different shelf life, a different torque spec, or a different way to use it. So be aware of that. Another neat thing is wheels are starting to see a lot of different trends, again, coming from racing now, where you've got what are they called? Center lock wheels, Porsche.
Yeah, the center lock.
So you can. It's very, very rare, but some guys convert their wheels to center lock. That's a whole hub. And
actually, I've seen more guys with center lock convert to 5-bolt.
Really?
It's easier for them at the track to, You know, instead of carrying around a 7-foot extended torque wrench.
You got to hang off.
Yeah, you got to hang off. If it's a lot easier for them to just zip it off and stuff.
Yeah.
So
and it opens up your wheel options too.
It does.
Yeah, you're looking at an expensive wheel if it's center lock.
Yeah.
So we've talked about all of the engineering of it. There's a whole other perspective which you can disagree with us all you want for this next little bit, but it's the looks.
Yeah, I mean, looks are. I mean, I say this word a lot, but it is completely subjective.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's going to have a different, you know, a different style, and they like the way it looks. I think some looks are well overplayed, like you know, like the CSL wheels for the E46 M3. I mean, like, Jesus, I'm so sick of seeing them. I mean, everyone.
There's a reason why it's common. It looks good, it's classy, but you're gonna be like everyone else at this point.
Yeah, that's it.
It's you want to be different, but you want to be, you know, again, it's all subjective. So a couple of key things we want to talk about here. So let's start with basic, relevant to all wheels if they're cast or not, or forged. I learned very early on, I still remember the wheel. It was a Stern wheel, and I wanted it for my first car.
Stern? Is that a brand?
It was a brand, yeah.
Okay.
We're not around anymore. And black centers, 10 spoke, a nice like split 5 spoke, a machined lip, and I saw it on the car, and it looked tiny. Tiny. And it's perspective. It was it meant to have a big lip and a very aggressive curved spoke. The face was black, and those are the two main things you want to be aware of. A dark face and a lip will automatically, just from perspective, make a smaller looking wheel. Yeah,
and also keep in mind when you're browsing the internet for wheels and you're on the wheel manufacturers, they're always going to show you the sexiest version of that wheel with like the most concavity and the most depth. And then you got the guy with the Corvette or the Mercedes with like the high offset that he just simply cannot have any concavity.
There's no concavity.
And he's like, I want these wheels. I'm like, well, they're not going to look like that on your car. Why not? I'm like, and you know, you're trying to explain to them where the brakes sit further out, and then you have a higher offset, and the wheel sits like the face of the wheel is really close to the caliper and really close to the fender. Just, you know, some wheels you can't have a big dish unless you do a wide body, like an over fender or some sort of wide.
There's a lot of tricks. So like, you know, if you're on a website too, sometimes they'll show a 3/4 view or a turned wheel view, and even that won't necessarily accurately represent the diameter or the concavity. Concavity is the biggest.
Well, I mean, like, so the
issue.
Let's say it's a 5-spoke, right?
Yeah.
The 5-spoke, you know, they'll show you a picture of a 19-inch 5-spoke, but if you're going to get a 16-inch version of that same, the spokes are going to be short and stumpy.
Yep.
You know, like the 19, you can put your hand in there. The 16, you can't.
Yep.
So once you get your 16-inch, you know, stumpy 5-star wheel, you're like, oh my God, this is not what it looked like on the brochure.
Yeah, it's going to be very different.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can go on certain websites and they try and superimpose the wheels on the. I don't know. I have yet to see like a good version. Yeah, a good version of that. So.
I will say that tire rack is okay, but it gives you just the side view of your car, and it's still not great.
I would say the best thing to do is, you know, just
go to a shop.
Well, that or Google it and look for, you know, or Instagram, look for a hashtag, you know, hashtag whatever that wheel is. And then try and see, like, hashtag that wheel, so like X brand wheel, and then 19-inch. You don't have to have the car, just, you know, have that.
Yeah, look for it in the size you're going to get.
Yeah.
And that way you'll see relevant what it is.
Exactly.
You can go down to shops that, you know, try a wheel next to your car, get an idea for how it may look. There's nothing better than in person. I think to get an idea. It doesn't mean you're going to land on that wheel, but you can pull a couple ideas from it. But again,
It's also the sizing too. Like sizing is a big deal. Generally, like, you know, it depends how extreme you want to go. If you want to get really close to your fender and have like next to no gap between the tire, the fender, and, you know, have it like really flush look, and then, you know, everything is taken into consideration. The brand of the tire, because certain brands will have like a
bigger section width,
fatter, bigger section width, be like a fatter a thicker design. A 225 from this brand will be different from a 225 on a different brand.
Yeah.
And then the offset. Offset is where the wheel sits relative to the body. If it's all the way in, it's basically a higher offset, and if it's all the way out, it's kind of a lower offset. It's actually kind of the opposite offset.
So I'll put a graphic up for you here, and we'll leave it on the screen for a few minutes. But essentially, you got to look at four major things. So offset, which is the center line of the wheel versus where the hub will meet the back of the face. The width of the wheel, which is the actual width, and that's relevant to the offset. The diameter, which is the most straightforward thing. It's funny, actually, I've seen people get confused by diameter. Diameter makes no difference to a wheel's fitment as long as you are compensating with the tire. So what you want to be aware of is the overall diameter stock versus where you go with that. There's plenty. I like to use 11Tentires.com. It has a good calculator for that.
I usually use Will They Fit. There's like a fitment guide there.
So you use those sites. They're a good reference. They do the math basically for you. But if the math isn't that hard to do. The overall diameter was the last one.
I guess the tire size would be the big thing.
Yeah. So it's tire size, and that's the thing. All those calculators you want to be aware.
It depends. It depends what you're going for. Also, if you're really into that stance look, then you're going to be getting the wheel as fat and as big
wide
as possible.
Yeah.
And then the tire, you're basically going to stretch the tire, and I don't really recommend doing that. It's not very safe. But
that's a whole other thing. Like it's you can get into stretch, poke.
Yeah.
Right.
Poking is when the wheel is
out,
kind of sticking out. Then obviously stretch, it means you're stretching the tire. The tire is narrower than what the wheel is designed to carry. So if you have like let's say a 10-inch wide wheel, and you put like a 225 tire on, it's going to be stretched all the way in, because really a 10-inch wheel should have a 295.
There's all sorts of ways. It depends on what you want to go for. We actually just last night we were talking to a friend who's trying to fit the rear tire, a fairly wide rear tire under his fender, and the options are now, a narrower tire to get underneath, but then you're exposing the rim to damage potentially. And it's less of a rubber patch.
He needs a traction. He's putting 800 to the wheel. So 2 wheels. So he needs a 345.
So less rubber is not an option. The other option is you can't change the rim in this scenario. And then the other option is camber. And then camber is not necessarily the solution because it's changing your contact patch.
You'll have more contact on the inside of the tire, and it's good for the track for around corners, but in a straight line, camber is not your friend.
Exactly. And then for the average person, when you're going for that look, camber can significantly wear a tire. You're basically kissing a tire goodbye in half the time.
Oh, for sure.
So of course, there's ways to get the look that you want.
Actually, that could be a good segue, because tires do have either they're asymmetrical or they're directional.
Oh yeah.
There's not too many tires that you're able to just basically rotate and flip around and stuff. I mean, maybe just like the regular ho-hum passenger tires, you can do that. But any of these very specific tires, they're either asymmetrical, meaning one side is labeled outside, the other side is labeled inside, and it's designed that way to basically do, to have the water evacuate when you're driving in the rain, and load forces. So when you're going around a corner, the outside tire, the radial plies are designed to, basically
they're all engineered for different reasons. So the reason we bring that up is again to the wear. So you want to be aware of the wear for rotational. So you'll start to hear stuff like a square setup, which is it just means you're running the same tires in all 4 corners.
If you're running a directional tire, then you can actually peel them off the rim and rotate them. And you can do that, right? But
asymmetrical, you can't do anything unless you have a square setup where they're the same front to back.
I guess you could do that.
Right. But it's you want to be aware that it'll change your operating costs. There's actually, now that we mention it, even changing one tire versus the other, one significantly worn, let's say you've blown it out or you had a puncture, you've come across this. It's as bad as having a problematic alignment.
You really should. That's the other thing too. You really should replace tires in pairs. Generally, you don't have to stick with the same brand front to back, but side to side, you should have the exact same tire left to right. Right, so you can have Pirellis in the front and Michelin's in the back, but make sure that they're equal left to right. So
it's so there's a lot of options. The other thing is well, I guess we won't get into the looks too much, but be aware that we talked about there's different lips, there's different construction. When it gets to the hardware area of things, you can have hidden hardware, which just means it's behind the face and not visible in the barrel.
Yep.
You can have hardware that shows. There's all sorts of different finishes, so you can have color is the way that you can go. You can get painted wheels, you can get powder coated wheels, which is a little bit more durable.
Yeah.
You know, there's a new phase called tinting where it's basically a clear with tint in it.
Yep.
You can get a machine finish, which is basically fresh off the machine, brushed finish, which just looks like a scotch pad to it, but it looks great if it's cleared right.
Just keep in mind, some of these finishes are hard to replicate. So if you get a bit of curb rash and you try and repair the wheel.
Yeah. Now that's actually another thing too. You want to be aware, what is that where it meets? That's the rim protector. There's a spot of the tire that's called the rim protector, and it's there for a reason.
Well, I mean, yeah, it doesn't...
doesn't really, but...
Yeah, it doesn't really. So, like, some tires do have what they call a rim protector band on the outside, and, you know, it might...
It might save a little bit of curb rash.
Yeah.
So be aware of that. Again, if you're stretching your tires, you're going to be showing your wheel. So we talked about concavity. I want to jump back to that for a second for clarification. So concavity is, or a concave wheel, is literally the curvature of the wheel, and it's generally the sexier wheels you see for most people. Again, it's subjective.
Yeah.
Is a very curved wheel. I'll actually put an example up of, well, your car's got front to back. It's staggered, right?
Yep, staggered.
So I'll put up both of our cars because we both run a staggered setup. So the front wheels have less of a curvature or less concavity than the rear.
Yep.
So just so you know what that can look like, and it obviously represents what we talked about in terms of how it looks online versus what you're actually buying.
Yep.
And it's similar. Like for reference, on my car, the back is a 10-inch and the front is an 8.5. And for that 1.5-inch difference, you're seeing no concavity versus concavity.
Yeah.
And yours, what's the difference front to back?
11 in the back, 9.5 front. But I've got like it's what they call a super
concave or whatever?
Yeah, super deep in the back and medium in the front.
Yeah, so it still looks concave, but it's a difference.
Yeah, it's a difference. It's because of the offsets, right? Like, I think you have to have basically a 25 offset or less in order to go with a super deep concave.
Be aware of that. Let's touch on that for a second. For some odd reason, because we live in a world where nothing is equal just yet. Everyone's trying hard, but wheels are in millimeter offset, which is metric, and everything else on the wheel is imperial, so inch, and then you get back to the tire, and same thing. Part of it is one of it is a metric is the width. Then the sidewall size is a percentage of the width. And then you've got the inch for the rim. So be aware of that. If you're confused, you should be. But it's all standardized.
Welcome to the world of wheels.
Yeah. So. It's a bit of trial and error. Get an idea of what you want. I think that's number one. Do you want to go to the track? Do you want something light? Do you want
keep in mind,
how the feel is?
If you got a big brake kit, that's a big.
Gotta clear it.
You got to clear it. Those spokes have to clear the caliper.
Spokes have to clear the caliper. The barrel's got to clear the caliper.
The barrel's got to
If you have keep that in mind. If you've got a smaller wheel and you've got 1 or 2 millimeters of space between the barrel and the brake, you're going to heat up that wheel. Or I saw, what's his name? Ben from Gears and Gasoline. He had an Evo and he was at the track and the rim just bent enough to touch the caliper and he shaved the wheel into 2 pieces. He made himself his own personal 2-piece. So
I heard about that.
Yeah, it's just be aware of that. Like we said, it's material. It flexes. It does things that you want to be aware of. It's a bit of an art. It is a bit of an art. So have a chat. I mean, Randy can help you out. 11Tenths can help you out. You guys work with a couple of wheel manufacturers and shops as well. Yeah.
Actually, if you do have the means to spend the money and you want to design something completely one-off, we do have a company that works with us that builds custom wheels. We've had a couple of completely bespoke custom wheels made for some of our cars, our personal cars. Just throw up some pictures.
I'll throw that up on the screen.
And so like really, the world's your oyster. So whatever you guys want, we can go ahead and.
No, it's whatever the world is your oyster there. In all the different setups, or if you've got, if you want to refinish, or one thing we didn't touch on, and again, it deals with the material stress and what you want to do, but you can also take an old wheel, cut it apart and turn it into a 2 or 3 piece.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Again, it's a little bit of a tear between what the material stress can take and what it's engineered for, but it is possible. So
it is.
I
think it's probably safer to just like recreate it from billet,
100%.
right from the get-go.
Stronger, but
yeah,
we covered off a lot there. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment. Let us know what you think. How did you come to your perfect setup? Or if you have a question, put it in the comments. We'd be glad to help. We are watching the comments, so stay tuned, and we'll see you next month.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.